we're going to record this. So everything I'm talking about is going to be recorded.
Oh, wow. And it says streaming live on YouTube. Wow.
Oh, yeah, man. This is high tech. I'm like the evil villain. Let's see here. Let me mute that. All right, there we go. All right, everybody, thank you. I'm glad you're joining me on Sunday evening. I appreciate that. I personally hate Sundays for a lot of reasons, mostly because I just don't feel like going back to work tomorrow. But what I do want to talk about, through the week, we see a lot of stuff. It seems like there's a lot of little personal struggles that drag us off track. And it can be a lot of things. It can be sickness. It can be relationships. It can be money. There's all kinds of shit in the world that drags us off where we really feel like we're operating our best at. And that's the real kicker of when we kick this off. How do we stick with it? How do we make it through some of these tougher times? Where's our resource in that? Who do I rely on? And that's the big thing, is that, we find ourselves sometimes at a loss for words, and sometimes at a real loss of faith. And I hate using that term. Well, I don't really hate using it because I know, but I do understand all the knee-jerk connotations that go with it. A lot of us as men, and it's all men here tonight, have been in those kind of situations where we have had nobody to rely on but ourselves. And we have found ourselves alone. And all of a sudden we find ourselves in a group of like-minded individuals like this. And it's really heartening to realize that there are some people around that give a shit. And that's the important thing, but we don't always feel that way. And sometimes I refuse to ask for help. It's just bullheaded. I'll take care of it. I ain't asking me for no fucking help. No, all that nonsense. Where do we find what it takes to put that last foot in front of the other? Where do we find in this spirituality the resource or the belief necessary to understand I have what it takes to take another step? I have what it takes to do this one more time. I have what it takes to get up and try again. The only thing I can come up with, well, not the only thing, I think there's a bunch of them, but Thor is at the top of the list. And Thor operates with this single-mindedness of purpose that I think it would behoove a lot of us to begin to cultivate, especially in times like this. They tell me sometimes that you're all black and white, Brian, you're right or wrong. And in times like this, where they're tearing down our statues, where they're doing all these ridiculous actions, and people in the street walking around with guns like they know what they're doing, like they think they might shoot somebody or something, not addressing anything of their own. It's important for us to understand exactly where that line is. When do they cross that line? And when they do cross that line, we need to understand that means it's time to take action. And I think we're kind of falling behind the mark with that regard. We can get on Facebook and we can bitch about it, but I really begin to think it's time for us to, if we're going to stand up for what's important to us, to really determine, hey, this is my line. I'm crossed and I have to take action. See, behind every threat of violence to enact force against someone to impose your will, there always has to be a moniker of or else. And right now, we don't have an or else. You're not going to tear down that statue. Oh, why not? Watch me do it. And they do it. Nothing happens. You're not going to march in the street. They get in the street and they march and they raise hell. There's no or else anymore. So I think it really is important for us to take a long look at some of this stuff. And I'm going to read some of it and give a commentary on all of it like I usually do, to figure out what that line is for each of us. Now, they may not all be congruent with each other. That's why amongst us friends, it's important for us to maintain lines of communication. The mob mentality is the platform with which the worst aspects and elements of the human person might be expressed without fear of recrimination. We cannot afford to devolve into the mob mentality. We've seen what that does throughout the 20th century with various political systems and the hundreds of millions of individuals who have died because of it. Well, this mob is greater than that mob. This mob is going to get wiped out. This political group is stronger than this group of teachers or educators. These teachers and educators are not teaching the right thing. They're going to be wiped out. Wrong think. Well, they're thinking wrong. They're not talking right. Now you're a racist and you have white privilege. There's one God who is known as the warrior of men. He's the son of Thor and Jord, the earth. He's the son of Odin and Jord, the earth itself. I want to read here from the Skald's Karpamal about a couple of struggles that Thor has and the things that he has to do to overcome them. The single-mindedness of purpose, the effort, and the beings that are there to help him, and what he has to overcome to deal with it. Now an account shall be given of the source of those metaphors which have but now been recorded. According to this, it's the first time these are being told. We've read them a bunch of times. Even such as Bragi gave to Eager, telling how Thor had gone into the east to slay trolls. I've never really, that's something that's always piqued my curiosity. Why does Thor always go to the east? I never have really understood that he had foster parents or foster children. It depends on the story that you read in that part of the world. And that's where the sun always rises. And I did come up with kind of an idea that he goes into the east to slay trolls so that Suna might rise, which, that's a personal gnosis, but I do think it might have some relevance. You never hear him going back to the north or the south or the east or the west. He goes to the east to slay these trolls. And Odin rode Sleipnir into Jotunheim and visited that giant who was named Hrungnir. Hrungnir asked what manner of man he with a golden helm might be, who rode through air and water, and said that the stranger had a wondrous good steed. Odin said he would wager his head there was no horse in Jotunheim that would prove equally good. So Odin's stacking the deck. Most of the time you see him doing this kind of stuff, making these wagers and operating in such a way that some of us might consider to be deceptive or deceitful. He's got a plan the whole time. He's eliminating those most powerful enemies against him and stacking the deck and accumulating knowledge and wisdom because he knows there's going to be one big battle and he's going to need all the resources he can have to fight in it. That means he's going to win, but it doesn't mean he's not going to try. And I don't think a lot of us are willing to try anymore. I hear people say, well, we've got skin in the game. Yes, we can afford an attorney. So let's get our skin in the game. I digress. Hrungnir answered that it was a good horse, but declared that he had a much better paced horse, which was called Goldmane. Now, he's going to compete against Sleipnir, an 8-legged horse. He's not going to win. There's no chance in hell he's going to do that. But this egotistical giant, Jotunheim, the basest representation of the simplest ideas of men wrapped up in their egotistical ideas, which is what giants and Jotuns typically represent, he ain't going to just pay the compliment and let it stand. He's got to prove something. Oh, I'm better than you. You just don't know. It's like most men in a bar, that when it comes down to it, they're about 4,000% less effective in a bar fight than they thought they were. And this is what's going on here. So Hrungnir had become angry, so he got a case of the red ass. He vaulted up onto his horse and galloped after him, thinking to pay him for his boasting. Odin galloped so furiously that he was on top of the next hill first. Hrungnir was all so filled with the giant's frenzy that he took no heed until he had come in beyond the gates of Asgard. So he got suckered. He let his anger get the best of him. Next thing you know, he's in a place where he is not welcome. When he came to the hall door, the Aesir invited him in to drink. Hospitality requires a confident individual. Most of us today have been manipulated by political ideologies and systems and religions to believe that if you don't believe this way, that group over there is going to take something from you. Imagine being the kind of confident, self-knowledge, full of self-knowledge type of individual who, even though they see someone who might be a threat to other people in the world, or maybe even to themselves in the right circumstances, has the confidence and the courage to bring them in and offer hospitality. That was the rule in those days. And it's something we try to live by too. It's very difficult when we got to lock our doors at night, right? Can't just let any old buddy in, right? It's not safe, right? Well, they just did. So we need to figure out what kind of individual am I? Can I offer hospitality to those individuals I know? Well, they may have wronged me, they may have done something bad, or they may be planning to do something bad. Can I still offer the basic decency of human need to someone at my doorstep? That takes confidence. It's something we need to be considering as we try to cultivate a real clear delineation of that line between right and wrong. When he went within and ordered drinks to be brought to him, and then those flagons were drunk in from which Thor was wont to drink. So he's drinking out of Thor's cup. And Hrungnir swilled from each in turn. But when he became drunken, then big words were not wanting. And that is no shit. That is typically how it works. And then when I became drunk, big words were not wanting. And you can see it about midnight in every bar. Those guys that realize they're going to go home alone, that's when the big words start and the fights begin, because they're going to do something one way or another to prove how much a man they are. If they're not going to have someone to go home with, they're going to get a tussle. He boasted he would lift up Valhalla and carry it to Jotunheim. So he's going to steal the warrior's heaven and sink Asgard and kill all the gods, save that he would take Freya and Sif home with him. Freya alone dared pour for him. Now, you got to remember, Freya ain't no joke. This is the most noble born of women, who is a goddess of abundance and fertility, but she also has Volkvang, which is the other home for the fallen warriors. She has the first choice. And he vowed that he would drink all the ale of the Aesir, but when his overbearing insolence became tiresome to the Aesir, they called on the name of Thor. So when the overbearing insolence that we're dealing with in the public today becomes tiresome, when are we going to call on something to say, it's time for you idiots to shut up? Straight away, Thor came into the hall, brandishing his hammer. He was very wroth and asked who had advised that these dogs of giants be permitted to drink there, or who had granted Hrungnir safe conduct to be in Valhalla, or why Freya should pour for him as at a feast of the Aesir. Then Hrungnir answered, looking at Thor with no friendly eyes, and said that Odin had invited him in, and he was under his safe conduct. Thor declared that Hrungnir should repent of that invitation before he got away. Hrungnir answered that Asa Thor would have scant renown for killing him, weaponless as he was. It were a greater trial of his courage if he dared fight with Hrungnir on the border of Jonanagard. And it was a great folly, said he, when I left my shield and home behind at home. If I have my weapons here, then we should try single combat. But as matters stand, I declare thee a coward, if thou wilt slay me, a weaponless man. I don't know how many of y'all have seen that movie Unforgiven, but there's a scene where he shoots the bartender and Gene Hackman calls him, you just shot an unarmed man. And he says, well, he should have armed himself. He's going to decorate his saloon with my friend. Another one of those lines, right and wrong, we ought to determine. Thor was by no means anxious to avoid the fight, and when challenged to the field, for no one had ever offered him single combat before. So he goes in there, he gets drunk, he abuses the rights of hospitality because the guest has some obligations when someone offers hospitality as well. The guest has the obligation to be polite, to be grateful for the drink and the half a loaf and all of the things that the host offers, even if you don't like them. If the chips are down and somebody shows up on your doorstep and you offer hospitality, you'd think they'd be grateful for it, because that's kind of how things are supposed to work, at least in our spirituality. But he abused it. Now he's going to pay for it. Not only did he abuse it, he got drunk, harassed the women, slapped them on the ass, as you can imagine, and then he caught the attention of Thor, the warrior of men, because they were all tired of it. We're going to get tired of it too. Then, now he's got to crawfish a little bit. So when you stir the pot like that and you begin to talk about what you're going to do and how you're going to do it and when you're going to do it, it's a much different thing to come face to face with an individual that can follow through on some of that. And a lot of times you'll see them crawfish. They'll start swimming backwards, trying to take it back. Well, no, I need to, come on, we'll do, let me, they'll 100 different excuses to get out of the situation that their alligator mouth has overloaded their Tweety Bird ass. A lot of the times it's dumber than a football bat. But here we have it. This is real clear, well, to me anyway, this is human behavior magnified to the divine level so we might comprehend it and be able to tell our children how not to act in these kinds of situations. Number one, don't be a dick. Number two, if you are, you better back it up right then and there. So this guy kind of doubles down on the insult. So he's crawfishing. He's got to save his ego. He's got to look good. I know what I'll do. I'll challenge him to single combat. Oh, yeah, I'll get prepared. Then I'll be ready for him, and I can take him out then. It's like getting in an argument with a kid in third hour and saying, all right, we're going to fight after school. All day long, you're going to be thinking about that. I promise you. You're going to have to fight him after school. That's where the crawfishing usually happens. Then Hrungnir went his way and galloped furiously until he came to Jotunheim. So he ran home. The news of his journey was spread abroad among the giants and became noised abroad that a meeting had been arranged between him and Thor. The giants deemed that they had much at stake. Who should win the victory, since they looked for ill at Thor's hands if Hrungnir perished. So this apparently was a pretty bad dude, at least among the Jotuns. He was no joke. They knew if he went, it's going to be hard on us. There's always somebody tougher. I don't care who you are. There's always somebody tougher. There's always somebody that wants it more. Then the giants made a man of clay at Jotunagard. He was 9 miles high and 3 broad under the armpits. But they could get no heart big enough to fit him until they took one from a mare. Even that was not steadfast within him when Thor came. Hrungnir had the heart, which is notorious, of hard stone and spiked with 3 corners, even as written the character is since formed, which men call Hrungnir's heart. His head also was of stone. His shield too was stone, wide and thick. And he had the shield before him when he stood at Jotunagard and waited for Thor. Moreover, he had a hone for a weapon and branched it over his shoulders, a huge club. And he was not a pretty sight. At one side of him stood this clay giant, which was called Merkur Kalfi. He was sore afraid. And it is said that he wet himself when he saw Thor. So imagine seeing a thunderstorm on the horizon coming your way and knowing that all of it is going to be directed directly at you. Well, yeah, it's going to take a lot of heart to stand there and get ready for it. They did. I'll give them credit for having courage. And sometimes we can't. No amount of bluff and bravado will change the course of events sometimes when we get past a certain point. And the more I look at what's going on in this world, we're well past that time where bluff and bravado are going to have any kind of effect. Because there's still all of these people lined up against us, against America per se, are still performing the bluff and bravado. And the media buys into it. They pointed at us. When are we going to quit believing it? When are we going to learn to stand tall? I got a giant here standing tall in the face of Thor. That takes balls. Thor went to the meeting place and Thialfi with him. Then Thialfi ran forward to the spot where Hrungnir stood and said to him, "Thou standest unwarily, giant, having the shield before thee. For Thor has seen thee and comes hither down below the earth and will come at thee from beneath." Then Hrungnir thrust the shield under his feet and stood upon it, wielding the hone with both hands. Then speedily he saw lightning and heard great claps of thunder, and then he saw Thor in godlike anger, who came forward furiously and swung the hammer and cast it at Hrungnir from far off. Hrungnir lifted up the hone in both hands and cast it against him, and it struck the hammer in flight. The hone burst in sunder. One part fell to the earth, and thence are come all the flint rocks. The other burst on Thor's head, so that he fell forward on the earth. But the hammer Mjolnir struck Hrungnir in the middle of the head and smashed his skull into small crumbs. And he fell forward upon Thor, so that his foot lay over Thor's neck. Thialfi struck at Mokar Kalfi, and he fell with little glory. Thereupon Thialfi went over to Thor and would have lifted Hrungnir's foot off him, but could not find sufficient strength. So in that little paragraph, you get a little glimpse of this great interaction of these divine forces. And they're powerful to be sure. And of course, they have some, this is where all the flint rocks came from. But furthermore, you have to understand that there's not going to be an occurrence where you come up against someone where you're not going to get hit in the damn head. So you got to keep your guard up. He got suckered into setting his down. We can't afford to get suckered about how somebody's going to come at us. We got to keep our guard up all the time. The best way to do that is not in an overtly aggressive manner, being arrogant and brutish and mouthy all the time, or with rabid remarks of ignorance, but with the confident actions of a man who has done what he needs to determine who he is and what he's capable of. And that means pushing the limits. That doesn't mean, buying a copy of Muscle and Fitness and taking a shot of testosterone. That means getting into the gym. That means learning to fight. That means doing what you need to do to go determine who you are. That means serving in the military. That means going through basic training. That means running a 50-mile race. That means doing all of those things you see other people do, because you got to figure out in the midst of all that, how badly do you want this? And how important is it to you? Because I promise you, in the middle of some of those long distance movements, you will figure out how important it is to you and how much discipline you have to keep putting one foot in front of the other. It will not just fall upon you. Even a racehorse has to train. And so do we. We have to prepare ourselves for certain things. And life is tough. I don't care how well you think you can handle it, but we can't afford to be resting upon our laurels anymore. The world is changing in ways we can't begin to comprehend. Are we going to take it head on with the full faith of the warder of men at our backs? Or are we going to sit down and eat chips and wait for somebody to tell us it's okay? I'm a big fan of the chip thing too. Don't get me wrong. Love it. Because even that best effort between the two of them, obviously one's going to win, but now he's stuck. Now he's stuck in place, trapped by his opponent, a fallen opponent. And it's going to require something important. Thereupon, well, straight away, all the Aesir came up when they learned that Thor was fallen. So he'd been in a fight. And any good fight's going to leave a mark. And would have lifted the foot from off him, but could do nothing. Well, that's a hell of a thing to say, to find out that your greatest champion has fallen in a fight and no one can help you. Who you rely on. Then Magni came up, son of Thor and Jarnsaxa. He was then 3 nights old. He cast the foot off Hrungnir, off Thor, and spake, "See how ill it is, father, that I come so late? I had struck this giant dead with my fist, methinks, if I had met with him." Thor arose and welcomed his son, saying that he should surely become great. That's what all fathers need to be doing with their sons, putting a hand on their shoulder after they've accomplished something no one else could, and reminding them, surely you're going to become great. That's our responsibility, because I know for a fact there's a whole bunch of us sitting around these fires at night. They never get that. Their fathers never got it, and their fathers never got it. And now we know of it, and we have the obligation to enact it. One more way, we clearly delineate those lines of right and wrong for the future. He said, "Surely you shall become great, and I will give thee," he said, "the horse Goldmane, which Hrungnir possessed." Then Odin spake and said that Thor did wrong to give the good horse to the son of a giantess and not to his father. See what I'm talking about? Odin didn't say, "Good job, man, way to go. This guy's got Sleipnir," but he wanted one more horse, wanted to bitch about it, wanted to say something, get a little dig in on my victory here. And there's a lot of us, men and women, who have had to contend with that shit too. Do something great. As in the middle of doing something fantastic, got to have one little shitty comment. And just, you know, and we grow up, and I have to watch myself when I talk to my sons that I don't do that, because I want to see them understand that I believe they will be surely successful, that they'll do great things. Sometimes watching them make the mistakes they make, I got to bite my damn tongue. That's all there is to it. They got to go through it. They got to learn it. They got to fall on their face. And when they do, I'm there, give them a hand, come on, let's try it again. But in the middle of a victory, you don't chastise your son for praising his son, ever. There it is, another reminder of what it means to be a man in a community. Be positive. Offer encouragement and strength to those men around you, even in times of need, for one, but most certainly in times of victory. Offer that praise. Let them enjoy the limelight for a minute. That's what it's all about, guys. It's how we do it. Let somebody take something you've said or wrote or created or encouraged, and let them go on and do something hopefully greater than you could imagine. That's what we're supposed to be doing. If you do enough to enough people, well, then you too shall be great. Thor went home to Thrudvangar, and the hone remained sticking in his head. Then came the wise woman who's called Groa. Now, this is the mother of Svitdag, which is the book that I'm working on now. Wife of Arvindil the Valiant. I don't know who that cat is, but called him the Valiant, so he must be pretty cool. She sang her spells over Thor until the hone was loosened. But when Thor knew that and thought that there was hope that the hone might be removed, he desired to reward Groa for her leechcraft and make her glad, and told her these things: that he had waded from the north over icy stream and had borne Arvindil in a basket on his back from the north out of Jotunheim. So the warder of men helped get this man out of a bad place. And that's something we need to remember. The warder of men helped get this man out of a bad place. There's an aspect of faith there I think it behooves each of us to try to cultivate. And he added for a token that one of Arvindil's toes had stuck out of the basket and become frozen. Wherefore Thor broke it off and cast it up into the heavens, and that's just savage, and made thereof the star called Arvindil's toe. So even out of that tragedy, he did something magnificent. So not only did he help this valiant warrior out of a tough spot, out of a tight place, cross an icy river, his one wound that he did have, a frozen toe, he broke it off, which seems kind of savage, and then he made that a star. Man, you got to wonder, what would they do for us? I don't know that it would be anything so direct. But my goodness, if there's something to help us make it through the toughest little personal battles, isn't that kind of damn important in our life? I seem to think it is, because I keep talking about it. Thor said that it would not be long ere Arvindil came home, but Groa was so rejoiced that she forgot her incantations, and the hone was not loosened, and stands yet in Thor's head. So Arvindil is obviously Svitdag's father. And that's something we need to understand. His father was the Valiant. And after Groa passes away and is in the burial mound, he takes a new wife. Poor bastard's walking funny because he's missing a toe, but he's still the Valiant. Svitdag has to live up to that as he goes to meet the woman he is destined to be with, for him to become a man. See how it ties together? There's layer upon layer upon layer in this, Lord. It all ties together. And if you're paying attention, the things you'll learn about living life in today's world are amazing. They continue to show themselves after a decade of looking at them. Anyway, therefore it is forbidden to cast a hone across the floor, for then the hone is stirred in Thor's head. See, all fear of Vin has made the song after this tale of how long. I'm not going to read that. It's a good, long, beautiful song, but I can't sing. So now we're going to talk about how another aspect of how the ego of men get Thor into, get the warrior. It's always the ego of something, the thought we think of ourselves without ever having done anything to earn it, that always requires the presence of the warrior of men. And when you think about that, it's always the ego. And when I say ego, I'm talking about certain your modern day psychological interpretation of the ego as almost a separate entity. It is that thought of yourself that you create in your own mind out of arbitrary boundaries or ideas that have no justification other than you sat there and thought of them. Well, I'm important. You need to be listening to me because, well, if somebody doesn't pay attention to that. And it can grow into magnificent proportions, especially upon social media, where everybody seems to be fairly important. It's like fuel for that thought. If I can type this, if I can write this smart ass comment, well, I'll win the fight and I'll look better than them, and they'll understand how important I am, and how smart I am, and how much more I know, and how stronger. And here's a picture of me. Look how strong I am. Yeah. How's your kids doing? How's your job going? Working a real one? You got a dead end one? You got any money in the bank? Got any kind of marker of success that anyone else would determine by to be successful? No, but I think an awful lot of myself. We have 1,000 kids in the damn street talking about how much they think of themselves and how much their lives matter. And have they done anything to earn that? Have they shown the world by their actions and what they've produced and how they've lived and the homes they've created that their lives are more valuable than anyone else's? We got to ask ourselves that. But as I say, the ego has gotten involved in this, and once again, it requires the order of men in Thor. Excuse me. So he asked this at Aegir. He thinks Hrungnir was also of great might. Did Thor accomplish yet more valorous deeds when he had to do with the trolls? See, we always need that. We need to have our faith reaffirmed somehow sometimes. Because like I say, these things pull us off the track. I might remember that one story, but that one story might not get me through everything. Are there other deeds that kind of form a pattern here that I might trust in? That's what we got to ask ourselves. Is there a pattern here I can rely on? Is there another situation I might believe in? And Bragi answered, it is worthy to be told at length how Thor went to Gerador's dwelling. At the time, he had not the hammer Mjolnir with him. So now he's going, he's just going there ready to throw hands, I guess. Nor his girdle of might, nor the iron gauntlets, and that was the fault of Loki, who went with him. So when you rob the divine aspects of that which you hold holy, because of your ego, you're handicapping not only yourself, but the ability of the divine to operate successfully in your life. And that's a kind of wild concept to comprehend, but it's a vitally important concept to comprehend. And it's something we need to mull over at length, probably on a daily basis. Are my thoughts in line with how they should act, how I should act, how I should be behaving? We don't always do it, but we got to be asking ourselves. I mean, you should at least need to have a choice. No, I think I'll fuck up today. I mean, I didn't always have that choice, to be honest. For once flying in his sport with Frigg's hawk plumage, it had happened to Loki to fly for curiosity's sake into Gerador's court. There he saw a great hall and alighted and looked in through the window, and Gerador looked up and saw him and commanded that the bird be taken and brought to him. But he who was sent could scarce get to the top of the wall, so high it was, and it seemed pleasant to Loki to see the man striving with toil and pains to reach him. And he thought it was not yet time to fly away until the others had accomplished the perilous climb. When the man pressed hard after him, then he stretched his wings for flight and thrust out vehemently, but now his feet were stuck fast. Now, this is also going to list Heimdall's 9 mothers in this thing here. So Loki was taken and brought before Gerador the giant, but when Gerador saw his eyes, he suspected that this might be a man and bade him answer, but Loki was silent. And it's kind of like some of these individuals that dress themselves up as something else so they might feel more important. It's the same kind of thought process. I'll dress up like this, I'll dress up like that, and I'll be a little bit more important. The Gerador shut Loki into a chest and starved him there for 3 months. And now when Gerador took him out and commanded them to speak, Loki told who he was. He spilled the beans. And by way of ransom for his life, he swore to Gerador with oaths that he would get Thor to come into Gerador's dwelling in such a fashion that he should have neither hammer nor girdle of might with him. So they're going to deceive the warrior of men. So Thor came to spend the night with the giantess, who was called Gerdur, the mother of Vidar the Silent. That's one of Odin's sons. That's his half brother. She told Thor the truth concerning Gerador, that he was a crafty giant and ill to deal with, and she lent him the girdle of might and iron gloves, which she possessed, and her staff also, which was called Gerdur's rod. Then Thor proceeded to the river named Vimir, greatest of all rivers. Now remember, Thor is the one god who cannot traverse the Bifrost. His mass is so great. I mean, this is the son of Odin and the earth itself. This is a gigantic individual who is tempered with lightning and power, just of the storm itself. He cannot traverse the Bifrost. He has to wade all the rivers to go to the thing each day. Now, the Vimir is the greatest of all rivers. I'd be curious to know what that was modeled after, but I think in a spiritual sense, it'll soon make itself apparent. There he girded himself with the girdle of might and braced himself firmly downstream with Gerdur's rod. So this gigantic individual, he's making the proper preparations to cross the treacherous river. And Loki held on behind by the girdle of might. And when Thor came to mid-current, the river waxed so greatly that it broke high upon his shoulders. So this is a big deal. Then Thor sang his, "Wax thou not, Vimir, for I fain would wade thee into the giant's garth. Know thou, if thou waxest, then waxeth God's strength in me as high up as the heaven." That river's not going to deter him. It can rise as high as it wants to. He ain't stopping. You want to rise up to heaven, so will I. And that's an awfully empowering thought if we were to incorporate that into our thought process. When we find ourselves in tough times or facing diseases that are terrifying or facing challenges that we not sure we can handle, if thou waxeth, then wax up to the heavens, and so will I. That's an awfully empowering thought. Figure out how you're going to incorporate that into your thought process and see what you can accomplish. Then Thor saw Gialp, daughter of Gerod, standing in a certain ravine, one leg in each spanning the river, and she was causing the spate. So she was pissing all over him. Then Thor snatched up a great stone out of the river and cast it at her, saying these words, "At its source should a river be stemmed." At its source, not downstream, blah, blah, blah. At its source, you stem a river. Nor did he miss that at which he threw. In that moment, he came to the shore and took hold of a rowing clump, and so climbed out of the river, in which comes the saying that rowing is Thor's deliverance. So you handle it. You handle it. You figure out where the problem is that's about to drown you, and you stem it at its source. You don't wrestle around with what's right in front of you. You sit down and think, who taught me to think this way? Who taught me to believe these bad things about myself? Who taught me to doubt that I have what it takes to accomplish these things? And you stem it at its source. You figure out where that thought come from, you shut it down, and you realize that's not me, I got this. That's what it's all about. You stem it at its source. So many people are focused on all the drama and nonsense and bullshit that's going on around them that their own thought process created. It's time to start taking a look at that thought process and see, where did it originate? How did I learn to think this way? Why do I think this way? Well, you grew up hearing it every fucking day. Now stem it at its source and realize you can think your own thoughts. And start thinking those positive ones, that even if the river waxes up to heavens, I'll rise that high too. That's a real powerful lesson, folks. That's something that everybody needs to hear. To understand, this ain't no big deal. I got this. I have what it takes. If I didn't have what it takes, I wouldn't be in this situation. It's how we learn. It's how we grow. It's how we understand. That's how we show our sons and daughters what it means to grow up and become someone. Now, when Now, when Thor came before Gerador, the companions were shown first into the goat fold. That probably should say guest house, because in 4 other codexes it says guest huas, the guest house. Anyway, for their entertainment, and there was one chair there for a seat, and Thor sat there. Then he became aware that the chair moved under him up toward the roof. He thrust Gerda's rod up against the rafters and pushed down hard against the chair. And then there was a great crash, and screaming followed. Under the chair had been Gerador's daughter, Gialp and Grape, and he had broken their backs. Now, when Gerador had Thor called into the hall to play games. So there's a second effort at trickery. They're going to set him in the high seat, make him feel important. There's one chair there. Then they're going to push him up and crush him against the ceiling. And a lot of times when we're sitting in our easy chair, talking about the sports we know, or the politics we know, or some idea we see on TV, making ourselves sit a little bit taller in the chair in our house, we need to realize that these ideas that are raising us up are not the kind of ideas that will withstand what it takes to handle the difficulties of life. It'll break your spirit once you understand that all that shit you were sitting there thinking about yourself and how important you were, well, it really ain't going to count when you're time to knuckle up. I mean, there's some things we should consider about that. Mostly, there's 3 of the 9 mothers of Heimdall that Thor's had to kill because of the ego of men's minds treachery. So the warder of men is engaged in a conflict against Heimdall's mothers, who is the warder of heaven. So we got to there's some shit happening here that shouldn't that cause a problem? Shouldn't the warder of men and the warder of heaven be kind of operating in sync? If you're out there killing his mothers, shouldn't that cause some problems? Well, what created that divide? Because we're all trying to operate in a mindset that allows us to enjoy some of the benefits of Asgard, some of that heaven that we want to call it. The golden age, the high-minded concepts of the Aesir, the earthly attributes of the Vanir. The ego has created and driven a wedge between that. Our thought process also separates that for us and makes it very difficult for us to attain those kind of ideas that allow us to operate in unison with the heart and the head and the divine. Then Gerador had Thor called into the hall to play games. There were great fires the whole length of the hall. When Thor came up over against Gerador, then Gerador took up a glowing bar of iron with the tongs and cast it at Thor. Thor caught it with his iron gloves and raised the bar in the air. But Gerador leapt behind an iron pillar to save himself. Thor lifted up the bar and threw it. And it passed through the pillar and through Gerador and through the wall and so on out, even into the earth. Excuse me. Elifar Gundren, our son, has wrought verse on this story in Thor's Drapa. The winding sea snake's father did wile from the home of the slayer. Of the life of God's grim foeman, ever was Loptur a liar, the never faithful searcher of the heart of the fearless thunderer, declared green ways were lying to the walled stead of Gerador. No long space Thor let Loki lure him into the going. They yearned to overmaster Thorn's offspring. When the seeker of Edie's Garth, then giants greater in might, made ready in ancient days for ferrying to the giant's seat from Odin's. That poem will get you confused, I promise. And I'm not going to read it. I encourage you to find it, though, on sacred text. You know what? Shit, I'm just going to show you. Anyone wants to see where I'm reading this, this is where it's at. Internet sacredtext.com, sacred-text.com, page 124 of the Skull Palmer. There's a long poem there that is full of all of the kennings that we probably need to learn, because they all represent something. They give us another aspect of the divine. They offer us another insight into some aspect of ourselves. It's all very important. But these are this is the long tail. And in time when old men and women would sit around the fire for thousands of years before the age of Christianity, this is a tale that would be told in this form to the children of that community. So they might grow up and understand, some of the things that we're trying to understand now. It's no short poem. The next one would be we go to Frigg, the daughter of Fjorgyn, the wife of Odin, the mother of Balder, the co-wife of Jord and Reinder and Gunnlaud and Greider. So Odin had 5 wives. It's a tough dude. I'm just gonna say. Anyway, for Thor, and I think that's kind of my commentary on what we're looking at, what we're trying to talk about. The Warrior of Men, if you read through much of his stuff, he's usually battling these kinds of things. And you probably, most of the time, because of the ego of men, usually it requires the assistance of the divine to help us navigate through that nonsense that we create for ourselves. And it's important because I think most of the aspects that we challenge ourselves with can be found in the lore. And then you see him continue through all of these great battles until it comes time for someone who is not worthy to be his son-in-law tries to take his hand's daughter in marriage. Then you don't see him rise up and just crush it with his hammer. Then you see him stand up and challenge with his intelligence and his understanding of the ways of the world, as a father should. And there's a real interesting about the path of man as he goes through there. His wife Freya, his stepson Uller, Magni and Modi and Thrud. And Thrud is sometimes often considered the third Norn, the Norn of the future. And her plate is empty. And the reason that plate is empty is because you're the one that's going to decide what goes into that plate. What kind of future you're going to build for yourself. And that's all governed by your own thought process, your own ability to operate in such a manner that the gods will be welcome to feast among the thoughts of your own mind. Anyway, that's about all I've got to say. But if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them or talk. Let me check these comments on YouTube as well, see if there are any. Oh, some of them. I ain't figured out how this works. Anyway, nothing there, just some very little commentary. Does anyone have anything they want to talk about? Any question they have? Because if I don't know, I promise
well,
you
Brian, this one isn't really a question, more just a quick comment. Thank you for rounding it off with that, addressing kind of the question of how free will and fate relate to each other, because I know that's something that often gets kind of misstated, that we believe in nothing but fate and we don't really have control over our destinies.
It does quite a bit, doesn't it? Yeah. I may need to talk about that, because that some people seem to be, every choice we make in life has an outcome. And I just, quite frankly, Terry, I don't fucking know enough to tell you about it. I wish I did, man. But I do appreciate that comment. I really do.
Well, isn't it true that what the fates are doing at the wells, right, is taking what our actions are and then spinning our fate out of what we've done in the past. Is that not true?
I think so. And I think it's also, there's some people that would subscribe to the idea that when you're born, it's already all laid out. Everything that's going to happen to you is going to happen to you. There's no changing it, and you might as well just accept it. Well, to me, that seems like the way to just accept mediocrity. Do you know what I mean? That seems like a way to kind of just accept being average. Well, there's nothing I can do about it. I'm just going to have to live, and this is just the way it's supposed to be. But I just don't think that's the deal. If I look at the Rig Thula and see how each generation grows, if I look at the gifts we were given by Odin, Vili, and Ve, those seem like tools to me. Those seem like the kind of tools that would allow us to grow and develop of our own accord. I think it's an invitation of a sort to join the divine in whatever course they're at, whatever it might be after we pass away. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Absolutely. I completely agree, Brian. And I think that the trouble that comes in when we start like just accepting this total metaphysical fatalism, what it ends up being really is metaphysical communism. It's we have this that's just doled out to us. We don't need to do anything to advance ourselves.
That is that's right. A metaphysical communism. I like that term. That's good.
So
Because you're right.
if I may,
That's
I'd
good.
like to comment on that actually, because the way I've looked at the Norns and everything is that that plate is empty, and I think there's kind of in the present, everything that comes out of that well that gets woven into the present is unraveled and replaced back into the well to come out as something new, and it's less fate rather than a cycle. And there's not really a strong belief in the future, but what you're doing in the here and now has built upon everything from the past. So you have the power to read the runes and to read the patterns and the weird to see what happens right now and to make it into something better. And a fascinating correlation I saw in a scientific article on a theory of time, that they showed this theory where there is no future, but just a plane of infinite possibilities, which is considered to be the present. And when they constructed it into a model, the center looked just like a well, like our ancestors described as well. And everything is kind of coming back up out of it. So kind of some interesting food for thought when you think about it.
It is interesting food for thought. I mean, in just about every ancient religion or ancient pre-Christian pagan faith, there is a will, and it's there for a reason.
Well, William Faulkner said the past is always catching up to the present. In fact, it's not even past. In other words, you are what the past is at your present moment. And if to me, if the Norns are busy doing something, then that means that your past, your future becomes the past. What you've done in the past, because if we're just fatalistic and it's already set in stone, they don't have anything to do. They're done.
Right.
Well, let me say something
Brian,
just
you
real
mind if
quick.
I
I mean,
in for a second?
I'm not a big philosopher or nothing, but
Let Mark talk, Everett, and then I want to hear what
yeah,
you have to say.
just a second. The fates determine when you die, but they don't determine how you die. Right? They may determine certain things that happen to you as you go along in your life, but how you take those things that the fates and the gods throw at you and what you do with them is up to you. So there's nothing wrong with destiny and things being predetermined, but how you deal with that is the challenge that the gods put to you. Mark, sorry.
I think that's a good analogy as well. Everett?
Yeah, there's a balance between things that you can control and things that you can't control when it comes to weird. So if you look at weird like a universal tapestry as a metaphor that helps a lot of people sometimes, you can control what you do on that tapestry, your little piece of that tapestry, and the more you focus in on that, and you focus in just on your actions, you can of course control exactly what happens. But within the broader context of the entire tapestry, you can't control what everybody else is doing. So and what everybody else is doing also paints a picture. So it also creates a pattern on that tapestry. So while you can, and that pattern, that overall pattern may have you moving forward more quickly. It may have you moving forward in your life more slowly. It may have you accomplishing things, not accomplishing other things, having mediocre areas of your life, having excellent areas of your life. And while the more you focus in, the more that you have control over your individual little piece, but you don't have control over the larger piece. So what I'm trying to say is there are forces at work that you cannot control. So in that sense, it is out of your hands. There's a little bit left up to what you might call destiny or predetermination or whatever. It's not really destiny or predetermination, but it's just outside of your ability to control it. And then there's the part that's inside of your ability to control it. And that's so it's a delicate balance between, there's, if your daddy's 5'1" and weighs 125 pounds and your mother's 4'7" and weighs 75 pounds, you ain't ever going to be a linebacker, right? You can't do anything about that. And that's, those are decisions that have been made on your mother's side of the family for generations, on your father's side of the family for generations. And that's just the way it is. But you can still, within the context of who you are and where you're at, you can still do a tremendous amount to improve your life and to do better and to, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a balance between, I hate to use the word predetermination, but kind of things outside of your control, things inside of your control. What I'm trying to say is there's a little elements of both. Anybody who ascribes to complete metaphysical fatalism is, like you said, Brian, just saying, oh, well, I'm just going to accept whatever my life gives. And on the other hand, anybody who says, I'm 100% completely in control of my life is just delusional. You're not.
Right.
Anyway, that's all. I hope that's helpful.
It was good. It was good stuff. I appreciate that input, Avery. Always
I
do.
think
Can you guys hear me okay?
add to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear you. Kind of tying in what Mark and Everett both said is that everything that is done goes into the well, and it all comes back out. Like matter is neither created or destroyed in the universe, the same way as our weird, just rearranged. So everything that has been done, like Everett said, with your ancestors, other people running around, that it's all going into the well, and that stuff is all got to come back out into the present at some point. Could have been generations before you, could have been halfway across the world, theoretically. When it comes out and rears its head at you, now you're tasked with how you're going to place that weird back into the well. Are you going to cry and tear down a statue and say my hurt feelings over something that you were never a part of hundreds of years ago? Or are you going to take it and use it as a stepping stone to do something greater than what it was when you found it? And I think that's the simplest way to kind of look at this cycle of just building and churning the well and your control over it. And that, yeah, there's things that you don't have control over, but it has to come out of the well. And how you handle it determines whether or not you can put it back in it as something better for the next generation or the next guy that comes across that same situation.
I don't know.
Brian,
Yeah.
when we had this, me and a friend had this discussion the other day, and somehow it came up that it's sort of like what you get from the well is what you put into the well. So if you put a crap existence and all this bad and all this negative and all this laziness into the well, your tapestry that is woven is not strong. It is not complex. And the more you put in, the more effort you put in, the greater your bonds with everything, the stronger your tapestry at the end of the day.
Get it.
The,
Randy, you want to say something?
Yeah, I was gonna say that I've looked at it this way: is that our well is our knowledge, it's our existence. I kind of believe that we keep repeating this circle, gaining more knowledge. We come back, a different part of our being comes back to gain more knowledge, more knowledge, more knowledge. And if you're not filling that well with knowledge, you're basically just stuck in lazy purgatory of non-existence. If you're not going out and you're not learning more or trying to thrive to learn more or be a better person or anything like that, you're not, like Tanner was saying, you're not filling that well with anything, and your well is empty. Does that make sense?
It does. I tell you what I'm hearing. We were discussing Thor and his support of men, some of these other things. It's always interesting to me to see what comes up in the discussion, to see what people need to hear. And right now, some of the things I'm hearing, people want to know that it's going to be all right. I think that's the biggest thing that, from my vantage point and the discussions I've had today and many other things, we're facing a lot of challenges. We would like to craft an idea that allows us to understand that all of this horseshit that's happening around us, that we're still going to be okay. However we perceive or understand how the well works or how fate works or how our lives are laid out. And I would submit to you that all of it, everything that was said, is entirely contingent upon the quality of your own thoughts. Every bit of whatever, everything that everybody just said is all contingent upon the quality of your own thoughts. Are they going to be positive? Or are they going to be negative? Are they going to be hopeful and understand you have the warrior of men on your side, no matter how big a problem your ego creates for you? Or are they going to be continuously trying to crawfish out of a situation they've got themselves in? That determines your future an awful lot too. Matter of fact, that's probably one of the most important things that happens to
Go to bed.
cultivate the success of your future.
Well,
Yeah,
then
Joe.
be quiet. Well, one thing I keep hearing is, and I agree with most of it, is about the quality of what we do. But when we're talking about weird and Orlog, mute that. When we're talking about weird and Orlog, we're also talking about everything that's going on around us, everybody's choices. A lot of problems I have with Christianity has always been, well, this happening was God's will.
Yeah.
But but it was a person's choice that causes anything. Um, and we're not looking at a confluence of fate. We're looking at a confluence of people's choices that put us into anything. It is the choice to do or the choice not to do that really defines what and who we are when we're talking about weird and Orlog.
Yeah.
And we're talking about that on a bigger scale when we're talking about current events and stuff like that. One man can do amazing things if they put their mind to it. It's one of those, it's not who's going to let me, who's going to stop me.
That's exactly right.
But that is the exact mindset that's being used against us right now. Because no one's stopping these people putting down statues. No one's stopping anybody from doing anything.
And I'm firmly of a belief that that is going to become our responsibility as men in the free society.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if the citizens of those towns would surround those protesters, if all the citizens came out of their houses and surrounded those folks, that stuff would be over with. But they won't do it. They stay locked up in their own homes and boarding up their own windows and all that other stuff.
Well, I mean, shit. We've lived in such a, that was good stuff, Joe. I do appreciate that, bringing that into the discussion. You're right, Glenn. I mean, there's not all of it. I mean, if you look, I was talking with Sean Black the other day. He said 70% of America's youth are not fit for military service. 70%, for a number of reasons. Overweight, don't have a high school diploma. There's all kinds of things. That's a real thing to consider, because that means that 70% of these individuals literally don't have what it takes to try to stand up and do what's right. And in the midst of all that, there's this resurgence in places like this to discuss these things, to try to become better, clear thinking, level-headed individuals who can navigate these very troublesome, a river that might wax up to heaven. Can we wax with it? And that's something that we're trying to navigate. When you're talking about these people that are going to march on a statue, well, the media's bombarded your average citizen with all of these tales of where they're going to throw pop bottles and Molotov cocktails and tear gas, and it's just a terrifying scene, and you're not qualified to do it. And we've spent so long expecting the government to take care of ourselves that we've given, I was thinking about that too. We've spent a long time expecting the government to take care of ourselves. Don't text and drive, got to wear a seatbelt, don't drink and drive, all of these things. Well, they sound good. You got to have a rear facing baby seat. There's all these laws that protect us from ourselves. But when are we going to start enacting some laws that allow us to protect what we love, allow me to protect what I love? And that's the thing that we're not grasping anymore. We've been kind of on a government teat just a little too much. And the people that are on it the most are throwing the biggest fit right now. I don't know. You're right, though. We do have to do that. If the people we elect aren't going to say, hey, arrest every single one of them, put them in jail. We do have an obligation to go out there and stand up for what we believe in. That's an action. That's the kind of action we got to pay attention to. Are we going to be the kind of individual that has what it takes to go out there and stand up for what we believe in front of everybody?
I'd like to just add to that. I don't know if you're familiar with Jocko Willink. He makes a really
I
great
love his stuff,
success.
man. Love it.
That,
extreme accountability.
Yeah, I think a huge issue in our society right now is one that you see in the workplace, the business field too, where we have an issue with tolerance. And what you tolerate becomes the new standard. And we have tolerated too much. And now there's a horrible standard in place for our country and our society right now.
Yeah, you know what?
I think we just need to man up and just deal with it and stop tolerating it.
I just don't. I don't see a lot of that in some of these construction trades. I don't see a lot in the construction trades and some of the heavy industrial trades. There's no room for error there. And so I don't see that kind of tolerance with regards to that behavior. Now in the kind of environments you have in retail and in some of the other things that we do business with, and that's we will find that kind of tolerance. But in your more professional trades, people are expected to live up to expectations to earn the money that they're paid. And they're paying almost $15 an hour at Aldi's to be to work in the grocery store. And that's just.
Well, I was just listening to Rich Dad Poor Dad, which is the book is a few years old, but I think it's telling. Yeah, well, I think it's telling that he mentions that our industry in America has gone from, like the industrious stuff, like he said, GM was the biggest employer, to Walmart now as well, and that's reflective. And I think with that switch, like you're saying, absolutely, you're going to see that tolerance for lesser substandards. There's more wiggle room because people think they can get $15 an hour.
Yeah, and if you don't address it, you bless it. That's kind of how it goes.
yeah. What you tolerate becomes a new standard.
Yeah, I know I'm kind of a jerk. It's okay.
Oh, it's all right. I think we're lacking a lot of hard truths nowadays, if you ask me.
Yeah,
like a football back. To a certain extent, I wonder if something like this needs to happen every once in a while.
What'd you say, Joe?
I said every now and then I wonder if something like this needs to happen every once in a while. It's like that old adage, good times are brought on by strong men, but the good times create weak men, and weak men bring the bad times back. And the bad times, it's the struggle that people have that define how strong they become. And these latest generations, they haven't really struggled for anything.
They're fixing to. That's all I can say. They're fixing to figure it out. Anyway, hey guys, I appreciate the discussion tonight. As always, it just when you get a group of intelligent individuals on here like we have tonight, it's always rewarding.
And I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I do too. I think it's good stuff. It's good to listen to men talk to each other and pay attention, and then and it's just I really, really appreciate all of you joining in, because this is rewarding as hell for me, man. It means I can go out tomorrow, Monday, grab life by the nose and whip its ass. Right?
Well, I appreciate you thinking I'm an intelligent human being.
I know, right? Don't ever tell anybody I said that, Jason.
You're still too late. You're still recording live.
Oh gosh. Damn it.
Cat's out of the bag.
See, my actions fucked me.
Posterity.
Guys, I appreciate your time, and thanks for taking the time to come sit down and listen to me and chew the fat a little while. That's good stuff. That's what we need more of. I appreciate everybody. Y'all have a good night.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you all.
Have a good night.
Thanks, guys.